Hello, welcome to All Saints Podcast. My name is Bill Berger. Really glad you're with us. A couple of things before we get started. December 22nd, we're going to have an in-person gathering in Seattle at One Life Community Church. If you're in the area, we would love to have you. We'll have cookies and stuff following, the usual. It's our Christmas gathering, so we're excited to get everybody together and do that. You can check our website for the address, or if you have our newsletter or sign up for our newsletter, we'll have the address included in there. Coming up live on Instagram, November 19th, I'm going to have a conversation with a friend of mine named Mike Rima of Convoy of Hope. That'll be 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, then, all the other ones. We're going to chat about the One Day to Feed the World campaign on November 20th. If you go to our website, you can go to the donations or giving section, click on it, and there'll be a drop-down box for One Day to Feed the World. Hopefully we'll have enough information for you to really be curious about that and bring an offering or bring a donation. Also, Zoom prayer on November 27th, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. I would love to have you join us for that as we just take a moment. Maybe some of us aren't able to get to a church community or whatever, but online we can just share prayer requests, talk about different aspects going on in our life, and just share a few minutes doing that. So that'll be 7 p.m. Mountain Time on November 27th. I also want to say Happy Veterans Day to all of our service members. I've got family members that have served. I'm very grateful for them, and a real special thank you to my grandpa, who is no longer with us, but he served in North Africa in World War II. So I've always had a special place for veterans and really, really grateful for them. Before we get going today, probably going to make this a very, not controversial, but certainly something that may get some people's attention. We're going to talk about a little bit about the election, but more importantly, a topic that I think is really critical to how we understand what's happening in the United States. So before I get there, I just want to say, what is All Saints about? What's our virtual community about? Well, we want to be a catalyst for people seeking an authentic experience with Jesus outside the confines of or in addition to a traditional church. And I think the reason why we are doing this is we all are in deep need of healing and wholeness. As we're all experiencing what's happening in the world. And we really believe that Jesus offers answers to the biggest questions of life, and we need a safe and encouraging space to explore them. I think that's really, really critical. Because I also believe old ideas of church don't work for modern life, and some of the new ideas don't honor Jesus as the center. So with that being said, I want to jump into a topic that, again, I think, might cause some people to be a little, concerned or whatever. Let me just read what I have written here in preparation for this. So in light of the recent election and the many questions and concerns I've received, I really feel like I want to provide some definitions that may help bring some understanding, hopefully. I realize this may trigger a landslide of concern for some, may even create some tension and anger. That is not my intent. I have friends and family who have an entirely different viewpoint than I do as it relates to the election, and they, of course, will always be my family and friends that I love, and that doesn't change ever, and it shouldn't. However, I am disillusioned, I'm grieved, I'm disappointed with the results. And for the record, I do not believe this result is going to be anything beneficial or hopeful for the United States of America or the world. An aspect of this disillusionment, for me, is the rise of Christian nationalism. So I want to use today's podcast to define what Christian nationalism is and how it differs from the faith of Christianity. And in subsequent podcasts, I'd like to look at things like the scriptures that are being used to justify the place that we're in, the election, specifically like Romans 13, 1 through 7. I have a guest I'm inviting to talk to us about things like the United States involvement in world affairs, particularly our understanding of our relationship with Israel. Anyway, more on that later. But here we go. So just today I want to give definitions. And so I've spent some time reading deeply various places, books, authors, people that have taken a lot of time to write deeply on this subject. I've looked at different sources, Christianity Today, like I said, different authors, different places where there's a right leaning and a left leaning and a middle leaning and whatever that means, but try to get a real broad scope of what Christian nationalism is. So let me just again provide definitions, and we'll use that for this podcast, and then later on in subsequent podcasts we'll address some of them in specifically. So Christian nationalism is the belief that America is defined by Christianity and that the government should support this idea. Supporters say that America must stay a Christian nation, and they view this not as an observation of history, but as a guiding principle for the future. And there are scholars out there, one in particular named Samuel Huntington, who will argue that American identity comes from its Anglo-Protestant roots, warning that we might lose our identity and freedom if we do not preserve this heritage. Christian nationalists do not reject the First Amendment or want a theocracy, but they believe Christianity should have a special role in public life. The term Christian nationalism is relatively new, and many who support this idea do not call themselves by this name. I think that's important. However, it accurately describes those who think American identity is closely linked to Christianity. So what do Christian nationalists want that's different from, I guess what I'd say, normal Christian engagement in politics? Well, Christian nationalists want to define America as a Christian nation and have the government promote a specific culture as the official culture of the country. Some have suggested changing the Constitution to recognize America's Christian heritage, while others want to bring prayer back into public schools. Some are working to include a Christian nationalist view of American history in school classes, claiming that America has a special relationship with God or is chosen to carry out a unique mission on earth. Others support immigration limits to prevent changes in American religious and ethnic backgrounds or culture. Some also want the government to take stronger actions against behavior they see as immoral. Christian nationalism often shows itself not just through politics, but also through a particular attitude. And this attitude includes a belief that Christians should have a special place in public life because they see themselves as the true representatives of American culture. They feel entitled to define what America means, viewing themselves as its original builders and main citizens. And so I realize that's a broad brushstroke, and I understand that, if you share this with somebody or somebody's listening to this, and there might be some, well, wait a minute, I don't believe all of that, and I certainly wouldn't say it that way. Well, that's why we have conversation. So, like I said, this is just a conglomeration of a bunch of resources that I'm bringing together to talk about this. And so, I am going to include some things that I think, we need to hear and talk about. And I guess that's my privilege having this podcast. But, in light of all of that was just said, how is this dangerous for America? Well, Christian nationalism often treats other Americans as less important. If it were fully put into practice, it would not protect the religious freedoms of everyone. And that's what we have in America. It's freedom of religion. Muslims, Jews, Christians, atheists, people are free to worship how they want. There is no indication at all that Christianity should be the religion of the people. I think if we allow the government to pass laws that control people's behavior, I think it carries risks. These include the possibility of overreach. It could set negative examples, and creating powers, honestly, that could one day even be used against Christians. So additionally, Christian nationalism is predominantly an ideology held by white Americans, which may exacerbate racial and ethnic divisions. In recent years, this movement has increasingly been defined by a sense of fear and belief among its proponents that Christians are victims of persecution. And I find that that's a sad commentary, as people really feel like Christians are being pushed out. I don't think we have any idea in America what it means to be persecuted as a Christian. My thought. I think some are beginning to argue that American Christians need to prepare to fight physically to preserve America's identity, and that was an argument that played into the January 6th riot. And again, I realize, like I said, this might trigger some reaction from people, like, January 6th wasn't what everybody says it was. Well, I think, again, I think there's some integrity to really do the research and look deeply beyond a side that I have or I don't agree with. Okay, how is Christian nationalism dangerous to the church? Well, Christian nationalism uses Christ's name to promote a political agenda, claiming it represents the views of all true believers. This is concerning because it supports unjust causes, linking Christian nationalism with illiberalism. And in this way, it calls evil good and good evil. I think Christian nationalism takes Christ's name to push its political goals, trusting Jesus' message as a tool for propaganda and viewing the church as a supporter of the state. And again, I realize there are some out here who might be listening and who, have their understanding of the election and going, no, that's not what I was at all voting for or thinking of. Well, again, this is why this is important that we understand what we're dealing with. It creates conversation, and that's my hope. So Christianity, just a basic definition of Christianity is this. It focuses on Jesus Christ and his teachings as described in the Christian scriptures and the apostles and Nicene creeds. It brings together people from many nations, tribes, and languages to worship Jesus. See Revelation 7 and 9. And this faith unites Jews and Greeks, Americans and non-Americans. And Christianity also has political aspects. Followers believe their faith can challenge and influence their loyalty to worldly matters. While there are different opinions about the political implications of Christian faith, key teachings that include fear God, honor the king, 1 Peter 2:17, pay taxes, love your neighbors, and seek justice. That's all part of a political aspect of Christianity. On the other hand, Christian nationalism is a political belief that focuses on America's national identity. It includes a specific view of the country's history and government that is not based on the Bible. Many historians and political scientists disagree with this view. Importantly, Christian nationalism suggests certain policies that it claims are based on the Bible. However, these policies are often just interpretations of biblical principles or in some cases completely oppose them. So, I'm sure that there are some that are just, what's going on? Well, that's what's out there. That's what we're dealing with. And I think this is where we need to really have a good understanding and have good communication on whatever side, if there is a side, somebody's on or whatever, that we just sit down and talk. So what's the response? Well, I believe the first thing is prayer. If you're a person of faith, pray. Pray for peace. Pray for understanding. Pray that, we have discernment and wisdom, all of us, to be able to come together as Americans, as patriots, not as nationalists, but as patriots, and there is a difference, who, love God and really love the country that we live in. So how do we bring healing there? Well, prayer. Second, listen. Listen to people. Listen to where they're coming from. Listen to, how they understand things, on both sides of the aisle. That's really, really critical. Third, read and research. Know what the issues are. Look at history. Search the scriptures. This is all important stuff. And I would say, I learned this from another one of my sources. I was tuning into a gathering of people who were talking about this very issue. And they were saying, look, some older generations turn off cable news. Younger generations get off TikTok. Quit allowing somebody's soundbite to influence or to deepen maybe your bias and your opinion. But read deeply, read the issues, read what's happened, and listen to some of the commentary that's going on out there. Finally, humility. None of us have the market on certainty, so let's be the first to admit that. I don't know everything, and I surely am, if that's the case, I'm surely confident that there are plenty of people out there who don't know everything. So let's be humble. Let's really want to understand the other. So a couple of books, and I just randomly, they're sitting in front of me right now, but I think these are really good. There's a book by a guy named Paul Miller called The Religion of American Greatness. He talks, in fact, he was one of my resources. He talks, very, very detailed about what's wrong with Christian nationalism. And then another book by a guy named Tim Alberta. He's a writer for The Atlantic. Comes from a preacher's home. He has a book called The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. And the subtitle is American Evangelicals in an Age of Extremism. And these are very fair people who are looking at it very intensely, deeply, and from both sides of the aisle, and are coming up with things that we need to know and listen to. So if there's podcasts that maybe you would share or books that you would share, let's hear them. We'd love to hear them. Let me pray, and then we'll close this out. So Lord, thank you so much that you love all of us, that every human that we encounter is made in the image of God, and we can honor that and appreciate that. And Lord, I just ask that, a lot of the division and anger that's happening right now in our country, that, Lord, you would help people that want to be humble and listen, that, God, we can come together and talk through these things and get understanding and maybe come to a place of a peaceful agree to disagree. But Lord, let the hostilities end, and bring wisdom and discernment to those who are in leadership. And Lord, give us wisdom and discernment as we're really navigating what's happening in the world right now. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thanks for being with us. And of course, I love your feedback. You can get a hold of us on our website, believedoubtseek.org. And thanks for being part, and look forward to chatting with you later in the week. Okay, bye-bye.